An off duty Chicago police officer is fatally shot after her shift in her own yard. How did this happen? Let's talk about it. This is Criminal Justice Corner, where we discuss true crime stories. We give the real details surrounding what occurred, and just in case you find yourself in the same situation, we give you actionable advice and tips on how you can potentially get yourself out. I'm Dr. Jennifer Matthews, the host of the Criminal Justice Corner. I have 16 years of experience in the field of criminal justice and a doctoral degree in criminal justice. I am also an expert in video evidence. Today, I have with me a special guest, Sergeant Atha Hunt. Mr. Hunt is a police officer out of Chicago with extensive knowledge in the field of criminal justice, in addition to his hands on experience from being on the front line. Mr. Hunt, can you tell the listeners a little bit more about you?
Well, you've done so well already. My please, and for everyone, my name is Atha. I have 23 plus years of law enforcement experience in the state of Illinois, with specialized training with respect to uh, um, felony felony crimes, criminal sexual assault, DUIs, and I've at two departments assisted in restructuring and making a brand new field training officer program that was more up to date with the current trends and current Illinois law enforcement training standards that's provided for in this state.
Atha, I appreciate you for being my special guest today. Let's dive into this episode. Police Officer Aréanah Preston was shot and killed during attempted robbery at 81st and Blackstone Avenue in Chicago at about 1:40 a.m. on May 6, 2023. After her shift was over, she was on her way home and had parked her car across the street from her home and had proceeded to her entrance when she was met by armed individuals who were attempting to rob her. She managed to draw her firearm and engage several targets in gunfire before being fatally injured. Surveillance video recorded muzzle flashes and Preston fell. The suspects fled the scene after stealing her gun. She was found wounded by another officer who responded to an alert from the Chicago's gunshot detection system, ShotSpotter. Mr. Hunt, what are you thinking about this tragic case so far?
It's just to give a few more details, if I may,
Sure, of course.
Um, the vehicle that the offenders were in was a stolen red Kia Forte that was taken from the 4700 block of South Indiana Avenue in Chicago, just a little bit over an hour before the encounter with the off-duty officer. Um, and um, uh, the subsequent to Upon the arrival of the offending vehicle, uh, at least three of the four individuals in the car got out of the car and
Okay.
initially fired shots at the officer. Of course, as you said, the officer did return fire, but unfortunately, um, was struck, uh, was struck, was taken down, and her service weapon was taken from her. Um, the shot spotter the shot spotter did go out, but unfortunately there were no beat cars that were available to check the area immediately. It wasn't until approximately 20 minutes later, when her Apple Watch dialed 911, believing the shots previous to that to be a car accident because she was no longer in motion. Of course, responding officers arrived at the scene, attempted to take her to the hospital, but of course, she succumbed to her wounds. To say it's a tragedy is an understatement.
I
Uh,
agree.
but to say that this circumstance is a circumstance um, that could have been prevented, uh, there are some troubling circumstances when looking at the offenders
Yes.
uh, um, that really suggest that this officer did not have to suffer a needless death like this.
Now, I definitely agree with you. And before we get to that, I just want to note that the red Kia that they were traveling in, the stolen Kia, let me be correct, it was set on fire and discovered in the 7200 block of South Roads about 20 minutes after Preston's death. And Officer Preston has served with the Chicago Police Department for 2.5 years and was assigned to the 5th District. She is survived by her mother, father, and twin sibling. She was 24 years old and was due to graduate with her Master's of Jurisprudence degree just days prior to her death.
Absolutely.
And like you said, to say this is a tragedy is an understatement. Now, Travell Breland, 19, Joseph Brooks, 19, Jaquan Buchanan, 18, and Jalen Frazier, 16, are facing murder charges along with additional charges for armed robbery, arson, burglary, possession of a stolen vehicle, and unlawful use of a weapon, according to authorities. And as we both know, these gentlemen have extensive backgrounds. Extensive.
Extensive is an understatement. I want to point particularly to uh, in the video that is circulated on the news that I saw both on Channel 5 and Channel 7
Okay.
uh, that was subsequently released. The individual, the driver who gets out of the vehicle and fires the first volley of fire towards the officer, that individual is a Mr. Travell uh, Rashad Breedlove. When you look at just what you can pull up off of a public database, again, this is a publicly accessible database for any individual who's been arrested in the city of Chicago. If you look into his background, Mr. Travell R. Breland was arrested um, on Wednesday, July 28th at 12:55 a.m. when he was 18 years old, and he was charged as a result with battery, assault, and a felony, the aggravated unlawful use of a weapon from a vehicle by a person under the age of 21. He was subsequently arrested um, on Tuesday, November 30th, 2021 at 9:50 a.m. Again, he was 18 years old at this time for criminal damage to property and domestic battery with physical contact to the victim. He had a third arrest in his adult years. And that arrest occurred on Saturday, September 3rd, 2022 at 10:27 a.m. when he was 19 years old. And what was he arrested for? He was arrested on a warrant for failure to appear for the previous arrest, and another arrest warrant to failure to appear for his first adult arrest. In addition to the unlawful possession of a high capacity magazine with metal piercing bullets and the unlawful use of a weapon. It isn't until we get to the unfortunate incident um, uh, with the death of Officer Preston that we look at his arrest on Monday, May 8th, 2023 at 3:25 a.m. Again, a 19-year-old for first degree murder, murder during the commission of a felony, robbery armed with a firearm, and that's 5 counts of robbery,
Hmm.
unlawful use of a weapon by a convicted felon, burglary, arson, receipt and possession of a stolen motor vehicle, and the violation of order of protection. The insult to injury in this circumstance is how is this individual still out on the street
Absolutely.
with the bevy of charges that this individual has,
Right.
particularly particularly with several circumstances where he was caught with a weapon. I just don't understand how this individual is not sitting behind bars waiting for the adjudication in his applicable cases than out on the street.
Right.
When we look at Joseph Brooks, his first adult arrest, of course, was as a result of this incident, robbery, armed robbery with a firearm. He also has a warrant on a failure to appear for a separate juvenile circumstance, burglary, robbery, um, armed robbery times five separate counts, receipt of a stolen vehicle, murder and strong murder with a strong possibility of death or injury, murder during the commission of a felony, and first degree murder. Um, and of course, Mr. Jaquan and Mr. and Jalen um, were also applicably charged. Um,
So you ask yourself, how are these gentlemen out on the streets and able to harm a woman who is out here doing good?
well, um, we have there are a variety of circumstances, and of course, we could spend the next 6.5 months trying to look at all the individual factors that play into the matter that happened, unfortunately. But um, one of the key things to understand here is um, so a lot of individuals believe that, okay, a person is taken off the street with a gun. They had no business using the gun. They were a convicted felon. It was unlawfully in their possession. They threatened someone with the firearm, or they threatened severe bodily harm to someone. So, of course, the perception of the public is that the individual goes to jail. Well, that's true. The individual does go to jail, and they are held overnight into their subsequent bond hearing the next morning.
Okay.
Now, um, during that bond hearing, there are several pieces of information that the judge has to hear in order to set a bond for the person. Um, and of course, per the bond rule currently for the state of Illinois, no person shall be denied a reasonable bond um, to wait statutorily for their process and move through the court system. So a judge looks at the likelihood of an individual to reoffend. The judge looks at the likelihood of an individual, um, the likelihood of an individual to flee from the court or fail to appear in the court on one matter or the other. A judge ultimately takes all of these things into consideration, and they issue a bond for the person. Now, um, what has slowly started to happen in the past 7 years
Okay.
is that um, we have, as was indicated by Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, is that we've used a mechanism called electronic home monitoring, which was originally meant for those individuals charged with DUI offenses, um, with um, with certain battery offenses, with misdemeanor offenses, and felony traffic offenses. There's been a shift in order to move individuals who commit dangerous offenses that threaten the public safety, um, and to shift them also to electronic home monitoring.
Okay.
So, um, an individual is more likely in Cook County on their first time with a weapon offense to receive a bond, an I bond, which is a bond that means that you're being let go on your own recognizance.
Right.
There, in addition to special conditions, and one of those special conditions are typically electronic home monitoring. That means that you can, both by the rules of electronic home monitoring and by the condition of your bond, you cannot reoffend. You cannot commit an offense during the adjudication of your case. In addition, you can only leave the home to work, or you can only leave the home to for child care. You can't be out in the middle of the night doing donuts, doing wheelies, robbing someone, doing whatever. You are confined to the home. So, what the public doesn't know is that the electronic home monitoring system
Okay.
is a passive system, it is not an active system. So, if the person um, leaves the property momentarily and comes back.
Okay.
There are times where the system will not alert the Cook County Sheriff's Office that this individual has violated that part of the electronic home monitoring program. You see,
Really?
it's a passive system. And a lot of people, trust me, a lot of people are absolutely confused at this. You're telling me that an individual can be at home and they're on this system, let alone the fact that there are plenty of people who, even though the newer modules that are attached to the leg um, are sense and detect if they're being tampered with,
Okay.
well, I can't tell you how many internet videos that I bring uh, to my roll calls and to other agencies to show them how easy it is. Uh, and of course, I'm not going to detail that for the listeners, but how
Definitely
easy
not.
how easy it is in order to remove that device and simply put it on. Watch this. I'm not saying another person, but simply another animal. And
What?
as long as that animal is still confined to the same location, then that person is
No.
free to do whatever they want to do and they can come back. So, electronic home monitoring is a passive system, it is not an active system. In addition, the random checks that are done by the Cook County Sheriff's Department on those individuals for electronic home monitoring.
Okay.
Imagine having a unit of sheriffs of less than 25 people
Okay.
trying to check the status periodically, randomly, of more than 500 plus individuals on electronic home monitoring in 1 week. Can that actually be done?
No, it cannot.
And therein lies the problems that we have.
So you're saying that these gentlemen are able to slip through the cracks because we have a flawed system or a passive system, if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so that's putting the public at large in danger.
Significant danger.
Okay.
Significant.
So how
Um,
do we fix something like this? Because this is a huge problem because unfortunately, this young lady, this bright light, lost her life.
Absolutely. Doing nothing but serving the public trust
Absolutely,
appropriately.
she was.
And I and I want to make an exclamation point about appropriately. Um,
Absolutely.
well, um, y- without stirring a lot of heads, or and there's another part of this problem that we have to speak about also. But um, uh, in DuPage County,
Okay.
if a person commits a felony
Okay.
and that person is and that felony it was a forcible felony, which means that it was criminal sexual assault, it was aggravated battery, it was aggravated kidnapping, etc., and they had the use of a firearm or other weapon. Very rarely is there such a thing as an I bond.
Okay.
Usually the further you move away from Cook County,
Okay.
the the more the more strict that these judges are when it comes to the proliferation of bond. Um, that is to say that while in Cook County, and I can't tell you how many times I've been to a bond hearing and I've seen an individual being charged with 2 counts of unlawful restraint, aggravated battery to a peace officer, unlawful use of a weapon, and they get a $10,000 to $30,000 I bond with electronic home monitoring. In DuPage County,
Okay.
uh, and I have to get I forgot the lady's name specifically, but in DuPage County, a young lady stole a couple of purses from a high end fashion store, a Louis
Okay.
Vuitton store, took police on a multi county uh, uh, speeding and fleeing trip, and
Okay.
eventually was arrested. And that individual was issued a $250,000 cash bond, which
Really?
that they had to put up $25,000 in order to get out of jail
And all she did was take them on a high-speed chase.
after stealing more than $3,000 worth of merchandise.
And she didn't even put anybody in danger. She just stole some merchandise, but nobody was harmed.
That is correct. No
And
use
that's
of a firearm, no weapon, nothing.
exactly. And that's in comparison to these gentlemen who one of the gentlemen you mentioned was actually charged with murder.
That is correct.
And he was
That
put
is
on house arrest and he didn't have to put out any money.
absolutely.
Okay. So what you're saying is offenders, I don't know if it's by proximity, who are committing crimes in Cook County are getting slaps on the wrist. But if they're committing crimes outside of Cook County, they're getting more stringent punishments.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even in police procedure, um, we all know about the upsurgence in shootings on the expressways,
Yes.
Chicagoland area. Well, let's look at policies and procedures from the standpoint of the Chicago Police Department.
Okay.
For the Chicago Police Department, for you to chase a motor vehicle, get involved in a chase for a stolen vehicle, um, that chase has to be authorized through uh, that chase has to be authorized by a supervisor, usually the sergeant, and then a watch commander, a lieutenant, or a commander can always overrule that chase. Um, and of course, they're balancing this chase based upon the public safety. Uh, what was the vehicle wanted for? If it's just a
Correct.
stolen vehicle, okay. Do we have a plate number for the vehicle? Okay, we'll put it into leads. Um, we'll do some fancy camera action, and okay, we'll find the vehicle later.
Right.
Uh, but let's take cases where you have fleeing and eluding, where it's a stolen vehicle with a shots fired, or armed robbery, or a person suspected in a homicide.
Okay.
CPD, more often than not, their hands are kind of tied.
Okay.
Uh, and I say this to say that in um, there are circumstances where CPD is prohibited from engaging in the chase, prohibited if the person stops a vehicle and runs out on foot. Now, CPD has to gain permission from the watch commander or the sergeant in order just to pursue the individual on foot, based upon trying to balance that with rates with the uh, 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 with with whether this incident will interfere with public safety.
Okay.
Now let's look at the Illinois State Police. The Illinois State Police, particularly with the upsurgence of violence in the Chicagoland expressways, the Illinois State Police, again, same circumstance. With the Illinois State Police, as long as the vehicle is a wanted or fleeing vehicle in which there was a harm that was done to a person. So we're not just talking about a randomly possessed stolen vehicle. Again, we're talking about someone who was involved in an armed robbery, in a shooting, wanted for murder, wanted for aggravated criminal sexual assault. Um, the Illinois State Police have a pursuit policy that permits their troopers to engage in that pursuit, so long as they are notifying their supervisors by radio of of the stages of that pursuit until they finally can get a hold of the individuals.
Okay.
There, there is no prohibition for the Illinois State Police, um, in order to engage in foot pursuits. In the last four in the last 4 months, and this is speaking from personal experience, and that is listening to the being able to switch over directly to the Illinois State Police Troop 3 channel, which is a channel for most of all of Chicago, excluding the tollway. They have even performed pit maneuvers. That is pulling up to the vehicle, and actually engaging the vehicle, um, striking it at a particular position that it makes the vehicle swerve. The driver loses control, and they're able to stop the vehicle from traveling anymore.
Right.
Uh, they're permitted to chase. Um, there is as some of us in law enforcement like to say, there's more of a downstate attitude toward the apprehension of that criminal. That criminal is not supposed to get away. That criminal, if they're involved in a violent crime, there's a potential for that individual to use that gun on someone else or try to rob someone else. So, um, in the city of Chicago, um, based upon the consent decree of compliance with the consent decree, of course, compliance with applicable policies. The Chicago Police Department has become extremely more restrictive in the methods and manners that they can use in order to take the enforcement activities that they do. And the public sees this. The public knows, okay, I can do a thing and then run away from the officer on foot, and they're not going to chase me. I can be a juvenile and get locked up, get arrested. And because I'm a juvenile in the state of Illinois, a lot of people don't know that in
Okay.
the juvenile justice system is based upon points. That is, individual A, who's 16 year old, gets arrested for a DUI. A DUI has a certain number of points. They get booked, they're photographed, but they're immediately released to their parent.
Right.
There
Right.
is there's no jail time, there's no sitting waiting. They're immediately released to the parent. And then the agency has to then fill out something called a 101 sheet and send all of this information, including the reports, body camera footage, and all, to the state's attorney, where the attorney has to make a determination whether or not they will even prosecute the case based upon the point system that they have. So
Wow.
if a person who is a first time offender, who is a juvenile with a gun that gets into a shooting and the person survives, then more often than not, instead of attempted murder or manslaughter, it becomes an aggravated battery with a firearm. The aggravated battery with a firearm has so many points, but those points are not high enough in order to detain that juvenile. So,
Okay.
what juvenile learn? I can shoot somebody. They can go to a hospital, possibly die, or severely they're severely injured. And all that happens is I go to a station, I get fingerprinted and released to my parents. That's it.
And that's why we have these children, gentlemen, if you will, out here living recklessly and killing people senselessly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just think it's unacceptable, and they have no regard for human life, and good people are paying the price for it.
Well, again, there are, and not to try to extend the conversation to areas in which I technically am not qualified to speak on, but as a background investigator, and an investigator in various felonies, um, when you there's something that we do in law enforcement, right? If we're going to interrogate someone or talk to someone, uh, we we run their history. We look at things like their Facebook posts, their
Right.
Snapchat. We look at things like, um, uh, um, we arrive past their homes. What activities are they involved in? We'll go to the school. How are they doing in school? And lo and behold, for example, Mr. Breland. Mr. Breland, if you check his Facebook post, and his Facebook post is still out there on the internet.
Right.
Uh, at 16 years old, on one of his Facebook posts, Mr. Breland is holding a Glock, a semi-automatic pistol with an extended 33 round magazine. He's holding an AR-15 pistol in the other hand, which is typically chambered in 223. 223 is a rifle round that the once that bullet leaves, that bullet, um, if that bullet strikes a person, that bullet is often said that there are injuries for which a person does not come back from. The
Wow.
wounds are devastating. We're talking about, instead of a wound channel where a bullet may get stuck in a bone or may get stuck inside of somebody or pass through, we're talking about a very thin round tumbling through the air at more than 2,500 meters per second, that upon hitting a bone, completely obliterates it, destroys it, makes that limb no longer usable. Um, he's holding that style weapon. And in that same picture, if you look to his feet on that picture, there's
Okay.
another Glock with a 50 round magazine. It's called a 50 round drum magazine. This is at 16 years old. There is no way legally that a juvenile in the state of Illinois at 16 years old that can obtain those types of weapons without without an adult signing for a FOID card for that person to have. And even then, the adult, if that child is going to be at a range, has to be with that child. So obviously, these are weapons that are being passed around, stolen in the street. And at 15 years of age, you can see another post where he is openly throwing a gang sign relative to the Four Corner Hustlers. This is the individual that we're talking about, who matriculated through a system, who eventually, after court hearing after court hearing after court hearing,
Mm-hmm.
failure to properly address this individual's treacherous, perilous, and malfeasant behavior
Right.
led to the death of an officer getting off of a shift just trying to serve the public trust.
That's it. That's all she was trying to do was do good. And this is what she was met with.
Absolutely.
Now, as always, I want to give the listeners some takeaways.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, my only takeaway from this tragic story is to be careful. It's sad but true. We must be careful. Of course, I applaud Officer Preston for being careful because we know she was able to return fire. So, she was being diligent, but we know that she was outnumbered. These derelicts approached her and she was able to return fire, but she was outnumbered. She was being careful. She was going to her home, which should be her safe haven, but sometimes being careful is just not enough, but we still have to try. What would be your takeaways?
Um, there are so many things I want to say, but I'm going to say this. When it comes time to vote, everyone, um, listen to the agenda of the individuals who are running for these various offices. Don't forget tragic circumstances like this. Don't forget the neighbor who suffers a robbery or the neighbor who has to deal with a burglary and the exhaustive process of what they have to deal with. Um, um, your local alderman in the city of Chicago, the mayor, the state's attorney's office, even myself, remember, we are all here to serve the public trust. We're here to serve you, period. The taxpayers. You're the ones who pay our salaries. You should demand that we are really advocating for you as a whole. You shouldn't have to feel scared to go outside and cut your grass. You shouldn't have to feel scared that someone's going to steal your car. You shouldn't have to hold hands with other strangers just to walk down the street at night in a community in which you live. It should, everywhere in the city of Chicago should be a safe community. Every location in the state of Illinois should be someplace safe for you to live, to explore, and ultimately live a wonderful life. So the individuals that run for these elections for these public offices, vote. Your vote counts in all of
I
these. Vote.
no, I think that's a very, very, very good takeaway because your vote counts. And a lot of people think that their vote does not count, so they do not vote. But if everybody votes, then their vote will count.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Atha, I would like to thank you for being a special guest with me today. And as always, you can find me, your host, Dr. Jennifer Matthews, on Instagram at Dr. Jennifer Matthews and the podcast at Criminal Justice Corner. Please comment, like, subscribe, and share. Tell a friend to tell a friend about Criminal Justice Corner. I will see you next time on Criminal Justice Corner podcast. New episodes are posted every Wednesday. Thank you for listening.